Erin Stewart, the mayor of New Britain, Connecticut, at a ribbon-cutting ceremony on Wednesday. "People are born places," she said of Paul Manafort's links to the city. Christopher Capozziello for the New York Times, New Britain, Connecticut, while Paul Manafort, St. Thomas Aquinas High School class of 1967, was becoming a power-suited political consultant and lobbyist in Washington and around the world. His old Catholic school was bleeding students. Eventually, almost 2 decades ago, the red brick shell of the school on this scuffed post-industrial city's east side was abandoned. Adorned only with a few graffiti scrawls and a sign advertising long-discontinued games of Sunday evening bingo, it sat empty until it was sold to a developer last year for $80,000, but it acquired a certain interest for a wider audience than the local graffiti artist when Mr. Manafort was indicted on charges that he had laundered more than $18 million through overseas shell companies during a decades-long career as a lobbyist. For years, it seemed as if the fortunes of Mr. Manafort and New Britain, once famous as the hardware city, home to corporations like Stanley Tools, now best known in some quarters as the residents of DAYM Drops, a prominent YouTube food reviewer, were on permanently divergent paths. Search for New Britain on Google, and the first name that comes up is Paul Manafort, said Ed McKeon, a filmmaker who grew up in New Britain and now lives nearby in Middletown. "It's kind of depressing, you know. We didn't have anything to do with it," protested John Whalen, a New Britain resident who works at an aerospace company. "What do you want?" asked Mayor Erin Stewart, a Republican, shrugging, smiling and sighing. "People are born places." John Whalen, 61, of New Britain, Connecticut, said that everyone had been proud of Paul Manafort's accomplishments. Christopher Capozziello for the New York Times, this particular person had gotten into the habit of dropping millions of dollars on antique rugs, bespoke suits and luxury real estate. This place, which lost most of its factories decades ago and has struggled ever since, considered it a stroke of luck when the state built a transit connection to Hartford, the state capital. "When I was a little boy and I came here, it caught my attention. It was like a big city," said Mike Valentine, 61, a retired manager at Connecticut Natural Gas who lives across the street from the St. Thomas Aquinas building. He nodded at the old school, whose alumni also include the former NBA star Lamar Odom. "Now this is like a ghost town." That was all, of course, before Mr. Manafort became President Trump's campaign chairman and a target of Robert S. Mueller, the special counsel investigating possible ties between Mr. Trump's campaign and Russian interference in the 2016 election. "He's a beauty, isn't he?" Mr. Valentine said. He was not being complimentary. Mr. Manafort grew up in a family whose name dotted the map of this part of central Connecticut. Mr. Manafort's father was a 3-term Republican mayor of New Britain, serving from 1965 to 1971, who later became the chair of the state's Public Works Commission. Paul Manafort Drive, which is named after Mr. Manafort's father, curves through the campus of Central Connecticut State University. Manafort Brothers Inc., the construction company founded by Mr. Manafort's Italian immigrant grandfather, has built train stations and roadways all over the region. It is now run by another branch of the family. Manafort Brothers is one of the subcontractors currently erecting a building at the university. The site stands, naturally, on Paul Manafort Drive. "I recognized the name on the side of the building before I recognized it from Trump's inner circle," said Josh Ehrenfeld, 30, who works next door to the company's headquarters. "Growing up in Connecticut politics certainly was a galvanizing experience," Mr. Manafort told the Hartford Courant in an interview last year, after he was named chairman of the Trump campaign. "Some of the skills that I learned there I still use today. I was about 15, 16 years old when my father first ran for mayor, and that's where I cut my teeth." St. Thomas Aquinas High School, where Paul Manafort attended high school, closed years ago and has been vacant. Christopher Capozziello for the New York Times. After graduating from St. Thomas Aquinas, Mr. Manafort went to Georgetown University and then into politics. "Everyone was so proud of him for making it," Mr. Whalen said. It was like, local boy made good, doing international consulting. Now, for some residents, Mr. Manafort's travails rank as among the worst stains on the city, right up there with the Donnelly Bakery murders of 1974, 6 killed in a botched robbery, the municipal jobs for bribes corruption scandal of 1979, 9 city officials arrested, and the real estate Ponzi scheme of the 1980s, 6,000 investors swindled out of $350 million. Set the municipal rap sheet against the city's better moments, turning out measuring tapes and other tools, introducing the technique of dribbling to basketball, or so it is said, and producing figures including Walter Camp, the father of college football, Robert S. Barton, an influential computer designer and systems architect, and Tom Thibodeau, the head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Just hours before Mr. Manafort surrendered to the authorities on Monday, residents had been glowing about the fact that George Springer, the Houston Astros player who hit a pivotal home run in Game 5 of this year's World Series, hailed from their town. New Britain is also, its partisans like to point out, home to the New Britain Museum of American Art, a jewel of works by American masters dating to the city's industrial heyday, and to the country's second oldest art league. There are just so many unsavory parts, said Paul Baylock, 65, an artist and former teacher who attended St. Thomas Aquinas a few years after Mr. Manafort. But I really take a lot of pride in the objects and the things New Britain used to make. New Britain may not have gotten its wish to elect America's first female president. It voted for Hillary Clinton, 15,468 to 6,055, but it did bring to office one of America's youngest female mayors, Ms. Stewart, who was 26 when she was elected in 2013. New Britain, which was once home to a number of manufacturing plants, has fallen on hard times. Christopher Capozziello for the New York Times. She said she had received 2 emails calling on the city to rename Paul Manafort Drive, but had declined, explaining that it was not named after the country's most infamous lobbyist, but his father. It's sad, because all the good work that was done by the father is now being overshadowed by the son, she said. In interviews, however, the elder Mr. Manafort appeared considerably less popular in memory than he apparently was while still in office. Mayor Manafort was in charge when the local highway, Route 9, cut a path through the middle of the city, dividing it into east and west halves, flattening historic homes and tearing through a blooming downtown. If recent history is any indication, the city may have a hard time convincing people that Paul Manafort Drive should be spared. A group of Ukrainian Americans recently used the road sign as a staging ground for a protest against Mr. Manafort's activities on behalf of the pro-Russian former president of Ukraine. As far as we're concerned, Manafort has blood on his hands, said Alex Kuzma, one of the organizers. We realized afterward it was named after his father, and we don't want to ascribe the sins of the son to the father. Yet there was at least one Trump partisan in New Britain on Wednesday who was proud of this son of New Britain. Have you ever heard of the Constitution? Innocent until proven guilty. It's bogus. It's bogus. He will be vindicated, said a white-haired woman at the Art League of New Britain who refused to give her name, but described herself as a member of the area's large Polish community. The indictment, she said, was fake news, a witch hunt.